You links, see John channel here. Everyone subscribe, start. Thanks to everyone who's donated to the coffee, the Cash App, and everything else for that competing live streaming fund. So, what happens when you swap one lizard person for another lizard person? Or I suppose in this case, it's actually swapping one guy for the original guy. That doesn't make any sense. It's like, oh, someone in the comments put it. They said like, this is just a way to fool investors who aren't paying attention. You got rid of one guy who was leading the company on a woke, not profitable direction, and then you got another guy who did the same thing, and then you went back to the original guy. How does it? Isn't the repeating the same behavior, expecting different results? Isn't that the kind of the joke about being crazy? It's like, oh yeah, this is just the goal is just to fool investors who are not paying attention. Like, this isn't about making entertainment, and this isn't even about business. And like, people on the left and the right, but who are still in the middle of the political bell curve, say, oh, these companies just want to make money. I've heard left wing people and right wing people say that, and it's like, to believe that in 2022 means you've not been paying attention. This is a religion to these people. The religion is called globalism, and they're gaslighting you by leading you to believe like these are just companies and they're just negligent. They're just making these decisions negligently. These decisions that don't lead to return on investment. So you're saying that these people who are all to the right of the intellectual bell curve, these all big brain people, like they're making poor decisions repeatedly? Or I mean, Occam's razor kind of says that smart people don't do that. They're not negligent, they're not reckless. These are intentional decisions, but the motivation is something that you just haven't understood yet. Because I mean that's the simpler explanation. They're not motivated by they're a publicly traded company. Of course they're motivated by money. But the evidence does not point to that conclusion. The evidence points to an ideological conclusion, and you just don't want to scratch the surface of this because it's this thin veneer over this dark, seething abyss, and to scratch the surface of it is to look around and realize, oh, we're in the fog, and it's like, oh, those are steel bars. We're in a cage, aren't we? It's like, yeah, that's what you have to scratch the surface, like to wash this away. You have to start by at least like admitting the truth and blowing away the fog and say, okay, we're in a cage. We got to do something about this cage. Anyway, I'm just talking about Disney here. So Disney is a religion. The religion of globalism. It doesn't matter who the figurehead is, Chapeck or Iger or whoever else. And then it's like they didn't even bother to get somebody from some other fresh new name to at least have the appearance. It's like that's the disdain. They didn't even bother to get somebody from some small movie company who the board could still boss around. They just went back to a guy they got rid of earlier, who was just it's like Putin laying in the background because he can't be a consecutive president for I don't know how many terms. It's just like he just hung back for a term or something bizarre like that. Like that's this like it's the same mentality. Like these people, these aren't profit. The motive is not money. The motive is ideology. Like it's cults, small scale cults. Yes, this is a globalist cult at a global level. They're selling propaganda. These social engineering. They're trying to remake the world. So it doesn't matter who the figurehead is. And it's imagine a boat steaming upstream at 10 knots, except the stream is going 11 knots the other direction. Even if they wanted to turn things around, they couldn't. And these people definitely do not want to turn things around. So the example of Elon Musk, even if he wanted to make Twitter a free speech zone, and he doesn't really, he just wanted to make it a little bit better than it was. And I think it's going to be tremendously powerful and popular. Like in a year or so, like Twitter could have YouTube video hosting and live streaming. Like you could at first supplant YouTube and then replace it. Because like all you have to do is have a little bit freer speech, a little bit better terms of service, and people will start by dual posting, live streaming videos on Twitter. And if it's monetized, it's like eventually people are just going to just do Twitter. Anyway, so the thing is, even if he wanted, if Musk wanted to turn it around, he couldn't because Google and Apple control the app stores. As where they could just kick Twitter off, and not enough people, I guess, are comfortable install app from unknown source, like go to telegram.org, or the banks would just cancel payment services. Until we have free speech by law on social media and freedom from political discrimination, nothing changes. What's her name? Shoe on Head was arguing with Elon Musk about getting Alex Jones back on last night, and I'm trying to say like like you shouldn't even be in the position of having to beg an individual or a company. Like all this, you should have free speech by law. Like the political, you should be talking to the political people, your representatives who have that fiduciary duty of trust to you. To ask them, like, hey, why don't you guys pass some kind of law to prevent political discrimination and guarantee free speech on social media? It's like talking to Musk is a deflection away from talking to your representatives. And it's like, because like you get more response talking to Musk than you would from representatives, because representatives don't represent us. They represent other countries, or they represent their own financial interests. It's like, no, you're not going to vote your way out of this. And anyway, so Chapeck and Iger or anyone else, they do not want to change Disney. They are globalists. This is a religion. Only some kind of base Chad nationalist could fix Disney, and those kind of people never get their foot in the door because there's a self-censorship and a selection process that goes along in the West now because these globalist mainstream media and social media are so entrenched, and they have been for decades, that somebody like that is just selected away from these companies, from leadership positions. They go out and start their own thing, and then their own little companies, and then when their companies go public, these kind of like globalist handlers come in and take things over. You heard the conference call last year with the Disney people. They were all on a Zoom call, and they're all talking about the Zur Otherkin furry tooth spirit type of stuff. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. Or Leslie Headland saying, we need shows more diverse than BLT and Otherkin because we're leaving money on the table. It's that fallacy of you're chasing a new audience, but you're not bringing the old audience with you. Now, Leslie Headland knows that, and so does Chapeck and Iger. They all know this. But so they're lying to you when they say that. Like that Leslie Headland interview was fascinating because facts are not in accord with her statement, with her belief system. And she knows that, and they look at you and they get this shy, shifty look because they know they're lying to you. Like, we know they're lying, they know they're lying. They're just saying this for the mainstream investor who's not paying attention, or the kind of the sports ball and soy slop enjoyer who's not really paying attention to this. Like, that's what that shy, shifty look is on all these people. Anyway, so these people are some of them know what's going on. They're kind of more on the puppet master side, and the other ones are the useful idiots are kind of the puppets. And yes, they're believe it or not, they're useful idiots at all across the spectrum of intellect and at all levels of society. Like, they're people drinking the Kool-Aid throughout society. So these people have been brainwashed by cultural Marxism, and the thing is, some are the brainwashees and some are the brainwashers. And as far as I can tell, every mainstream company is infected with globalists once it hits a certain market capitalization, which would be probably a fascinating study, but it's not one you're going to hear on YouTube. Their ideology is an anti-Western one. They see nations and they use the power of media propaganda to subvert and corrupt. And on a smaller scale, you see it, the 4-panel meme of a bunch of usually white guys go off and start something, and then these globals come along and say, you made it diverse, inclusive, and equitable, and you invite us, and then change everything about it. And then they come in and then they kick the originators out of it, or a company goes public type of thing, and then they destroy what made it great. Because they're globalists. That's what they do. They subvert and corrupt everything they touch. And the new improved 4-panel meme is the guys have a flamethrower say, no, we're going to gatekeep. You can't come into this thing. We got to keep it. We got to keep it. What made it special is the people who made it special. So it's like every hobby, everything you're into, it's like gatekeep as much as possible. Otherwise, they will just come in, subvert, corrupt, and destroy it, as they've done to all the shows you're familiar with. Oh, we're making it diverse. So you're changing it into something it's not. And it's like you have this de facto conclusion that these new values are good things, but you haven't shown your argument. You haven't proven it. Oh, it's just assumed. You're not histophobic, are you? That's a deflection and an ad hominem. You're trying to compel through fear. It's like all those words. Those aren't. I mean, it's kind of a different video, but those aren't real words. Like, this is just a way to compel NPCs to manipulate people with these fear stimulus response words that are all recently come into the lexicon within like the past 80 years. It's weird. They first build these shields and they get them established. They nucleate and propagate these shield concepts, these manipulation control terms, and then they commit horrific acts behind them. And then the shields are already in place. It's like it takes 80 years, but that's how language control works. Like the study of language, and this study of what they're doing to language is fascinating. Anyway, but again, it's like it's just not something you're gonna have to talk about on mainstream. You're like, oh, so they already have pervasive control of this system. Like you're not going to fix a system within the system that's already controlled. You have to you have to create something new. So Disney is the left-hand path. Hollywood is controlled by Bolsheviks who use the media to manipulate the masses into adopting new social mores. Because the West now does not have a core dogma or belief system, it destroyed Christianity, it abandoned its pagan roots. A rootless people, I'm just like editing on the fly, will do whatever the TV and tablet tells them to do because there is no group identity to coalesce around to fight back and destroy it. And the white pill is we're forming those groups now. You're seeing some of those groups form up around you, and definitely get involved in those kind of things because it prevents, if you're part of a group, it prevents gaslighting. And you start noticing, like, who are these people who are manipulating you? They have beliefs not in accord with yours that are detrimental to social stability. And ultimately, like, we just have different, like, beliefs are so radically different now. It's not just the pop culture. The point is, like, it's better if people just are able to form separate communities de facto as well as de jure, like entirely different, separate areas. Because there's just endless conflict with people who have, like, why would people who have different beliefs want to be around each other if those beliefs just cause, oh, there's so much they can learn from each other. No, I don't, but they have different beliefs. Like you're selling something that people are not into, and they're not like, oh, but we'll get them. Yeah, but we'll get them on board with this. We'll convince them. She's like, yeah, but it doesn't go two ways. It's not a one-way street. You're not getting an alternative perspective in the mainstream media because the mainstream media is entirely controlled by these huge billion-dollar globalist companies. There is no alt company to offer a counter argument to it, a different perspective, because they're just never allowed to get to that point. And there's definitely an interest in it. It's just not allowed. So Disney is the left-hand path. So, and if you object in any way, they'll just use control of mainstream media, social media to dox you, get you fired, debank you, and destroy your life and your kid's life and your spouse's life. This is actually much further along than people think. You look around the forest, and as the fog drifts away, you realize, oh, those aren't trees, those are iron bars, and we're in a cage. If you see some filth and perversion on Disney, are you free to speak out against it on social media? Or will, like, the 12 angry Twitter weirdos track you down, get you fired, destroy your life forever? You realize, like, oh, that's like everyone is self-censoring because we're all afraid of these Bolsheviks. And it's like, you have reason to be afraid. They absolutely control America. If you're not free to express yourself because you, like, by law, you're not, it's like, yes, why didn't our representatives pass a law protecting us from political discrimination? You should be able to go on social media and say whatever you want, as long as it's not like a threat of imminent violence. As long as it's legally protected speech, you shouldn't be allowed to be fired for that. It's like, yes, the individual liberty should be protected much more than a billion-dollar company. It's like, weird our representatives haven't passed any laws. It's like, I look at our representatives and think, oh, yeah, they're not going to do that. So that's why the solution for all, obviously, I'm talking about more than Disney, but the solution for all this stuff doesn't come from within the system that got us to the corrupt system. Maybe the corrupt FBI will investigate the corrupt FBI. Oh, yeah, maybe the corrupt media will investigate the corrupt media. You're going to be waiting a long time. You're going to be waiting a long time for that to happen. So this is why the window continues to move left, because they already have control of the battlefield. Except, of course, they can't make you watch their cultural Marxist anti-Western propaganda. Not yet, anyway, but eventually Disney will just report to a Nina Jankowicz in the Ministry of Truth on your viewing habits. And you're like, does that sound crazy? Well, 20 years ago, having Nina Jankowicz in the Ministry of Truth, I wouldn't have believed it, but Biden put that in place. Like, he literally did that. Now, people, she didn't go over too well, but the Ministry of Truth is still there. I mean, that all actually happened. It's like the idea that it even happened in the first place shows you how far along all this stuff is. It's like, yes, pop culture Disney, it's just one facet of the crystal, but there's all these other facets and they're all connected. So Disney is moving around the top people, one king snake for a garter snake. It's like, but they're still reptiles. They're still going to push this anti-Western Bolshevik propaganda. If you support Disney, you're putting money in the hands of the enemy who literally hates you. If you have a value system, a religious, nationalist, whatever, if you're some kind of based in Chad pilled, you're not going to support a company that has values that are satanic. it's like at some point you got to look at this. Like even if you're not religious, you look at this. It's like, yeah, but calling them Satanists really is a good shortcut. Like these people are just sacrificing spiritually, at least, people to Moloch. If you support them, they will continue to push propaganda that destroys nations. Disney is not a media company. What do you think movies are? They're the best form of propaganda on earth. Disney knows what they're doing. The normie sports ball bread and circuses, soy slop, high fructose corn syrup enjoiner is not really aware of what Disney propaganda is. This is a spiritual battle for the West, and Disney is demon people. Anything these Disney sells you, these demons sell you, is fruit of the poison tree. Every year they slowly boil a BLT frog. Now we have armed Antifa who are defending Drag Queen Story Hour. That's how far the window has shifted. Yes, it's relevant to Disney because it's the same background matrix, the melange of cultural Marxism. So the like you see the shift between Iger, Chapeck, and then Iger again, and people see that and think, oh, Disney is charting a new course. It's like, but you just went back to the same guy. No, it's gaslighting you. It's you're replacing Mao with Stalin, and then you're going back to Mao. I think the goal, as someone points out in the comments, is just to try to fool the casual investor, the casual bread and circuses enjoy. Who's not really like who's like they're going to keep you on board Disney to try to propagandize your kids a little bit. Like this propaganda is not for you; it's for your kids and grandkids. They're trying to get the next generation on board. Will it work? Yeah, kids are. I mean, think back to when the 70s and 80s and 90s when you were watching shows. That's the age range. The stupid shows you saw, and then try to think back to the subversive, subtle propaganda that was in those shows even back then. Who was a protagonist? Who was overrepresented as protagonist, antagonist? They slowly subverted and corrupted the patriarchy even back then to put these like who was the bad guy in all those movies? Every time you saw scenes of like the worst, most horrific Malaman say acts against the person, like who was the instigator of those scenes? You watch that like, oh, that's not in accord with reality, is it? It's weird how the media has been doing that for the past at least 60 years. It's like weird. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next episode.